So, when is the last time you were more than 5 meters from your phone? Probably never. For me, it's when I'm playing a sport. And I want to tell you about a specific time that I was actually on the phone and I was in tears. It was my first year back. It was my first year away at the University of British Columbia, UBC, in Canada. And I was just on the phone telling my parents back home just how hard life was, how bad it was at my first year at UBC. I hadn't adjusted well to university life. I hadn't adjusted well to being away from home or living in the dorms. It wasn't going well for me. Now, most kids, most university students will move from the suburbs and they'll move to campus, move on campus, because that's where it's fun. That's where you're going to have a great social life. But I found myself actually I was escaping campus every single weekend, going back to my aunt's house on the weekends to escape the loneliness that I felt on campus. I felt in that first year, it really was a blur because I failed to make any real connections and I failed to make any real friends. And this is the start of my story on how I've been able to use sports to connect with basically everyone in my life, be it with friends, with locals in other countries, with colleagues, with love. It's helped me meet girls. And also it's helped me connect to my family. It's helped me connect to the world and given me an excuse to travel. And it's also helped the people around me reconnect with society. So going back to that first year at UBC, my second year was a little bit different because my floor actually had a volleyball team. And I'd grown up playing all kinds of sports. There was basketball, table tennis, cross-country running, even water polo. You name it, I played it. So when this opportunity came up to play volleyball with my floor mates and have some common ground and connect, I was all over it. And even though volleyball wasn't one of my top sports, I actually had a lot of fun. There was actually one particular match where I remember one of our teams spiked the ball really hard. We won the point. And I just sang at the top of my lungs, "Who let the dogs out?" And my teammates were looking at me kind of like you are now. Is he crazy? And I didn't really care because I was just so pumped up and happy to be connecting with people, finally making friends in Vancouver. That just didn't matter if people thought I was crazy. So after that, I continued using volleyball to both meet new friends and keep in touch with the ones that I'd met in university. When I moved on and ended up working for an accounting firm, they had a dodgeball team. And even though my time as an accountant was short-lived, dodgeball continued to be a huge part of my life, allowing me to connect with people both in Vancouver and eventually in Hong Kong. And one of the friends I actually met playing dodgeball actually goes to this university and is here today. Hey, Sam. So after my time in Vancouver as an accountant, I was looking for some adventure. I wanted to discover my Chinese roots, so I moved to China. But in exploring and finding out about this Chinese side of me, it actually hit me how Canadian I was. So there was a bit of a culture shock. But I was able to adjust and go back to what was familiar to me. So I was teaching at a college in Beijing. I was teaching business. But outside of the classroom, I was thankfully able to use basketball. They were dotted throughout the campus. And table tennis with which to connect with my students. These were things that were familiar to me. It was through table tennis that I met my friend Melody, who I ended up visiting in Beijing a few years later. Something else that was familiar to me that I went back to while I was in Beijing was yoga. And my first few yoga classes were a little bit challenging because my Chinese was pretty bad at that time. But what I found was since I practiced yoga in Canada, I knew enough to at least copy my classmates if I didn't know what the teacher was saying. So it turns out that with sport, be it yoga, table tennis, or basketball, these are really their own language. Sport is its own language that transcends borders and allows you to connect with people in other cultures. It doesn't require much translation because wherever you go, these things are basically the same. So continuing with the theme of how I've used sport to meet locals, after a year in Beijing, I moved on to Hong Kong. And again, I used what was familiar to me, sport, and with which to make new friends, because I didn't know very many people in Hong Kong. So I needed to create yet another social network for myself. So with basketball, I started out with just a few individuals in a WhatsApp group. And after a few years of weekly games, that quickly ballooned to over 100 participants in this WhatsApp group. With dodgeball, I made a lot of friends playing in the Hong Kong Dodgeball League. And I was able to give back and expand the league into Kowloon, allowing more people to connect to dodgeball and for them to connect to each other and me. And right now, I'm using my passion of beach volleyball. And within the past year, I've created a club where we hold weekly beach volleyball games, catering to all levels, no matter if you've never played beach volleyball before or if you were a seasoned beach pro. And starting this club, I connected to a lot of people, including the Hong Kong Beach Fives Festival, which a couple weeks ago held their beach volleyball tournament in Repulse Bay. And I remember talking to one of my volunteers that day. Wow, there's so many people I don't know here. You see, after a year of organizing beach volleyball in Hong Kong, I thought that I knew everyone who played. And I was pleasantly surprised that I was wrong, because now, on a weekly basis, I'm continually able to connect with new beach volleyball players and people in Hong Kong. So sport has also helped me to connect with those that I work with. As a teacher in Hong Kong, I initially found it very difficult to connect with my coworkers because of cultural and language barriers. The work culture here is very different from Canada, as some of you might know, or just anywhere else in the West. But once again, I was able to use sport as a common ground with which to connect with my coworkers. These were people that I saw every single day, and yet I knew nothing about them outside of their school duties. By joining my first school's basketball team, the teachers' team, I was able to connect with those other teachers and give them a chance to get to know me, and it gave me a chance to get to know them as well. At another school, there was this really intimidating teacher. Let's call him Scary Teacher. He never seemed to smile, and we didn't really have that much to talk about. There was thankfully, another teacher found out that I played dodgeball. He connected me and Scary Teacher, and me and Scary Teacher actually ended up making up that school's very first dodgeball team, allowing the kids to connect to a new sport and to each other. There's also a mastermind group that I'm part of, where a group of guys will get together to talk about all the things that challenge us, be it with relationships, with our careers, with maybe even with our health. And it's a very amazing group of guys because we've got successful entrepreneurs in the group. There are professionals like doctors and architects. And as an English teacher in Hong Kong, it's easy to feel insecure, like, what could I possibly have to offer them in terms of my advice, my life experience? Well, that all changed when we hit the basketball court later that weekend. All of a sudden, I felt like it gave me an opportunity to showcase my talent. For these people that initially felt above me, I want to tell you how empowering it was to all of a sudden feel at the same level as them. So all of a sudden, I felt like my life experience and my advice could actually add value to their lives. It was at that weekend back in the States where I felt extremely grateful that I played basketball growing up. But as you can tell from the drinks in the foreground, this wasn't exactly your average kid's basketball game. So sport has also helped me to meet girls. Now, when you typically think of sport, guys play with guys and girls play with girls. But what I found out with the sports that I love, especially with volleyball and dodgeball, they're actually great ways to get guys and girls playing together. And when you ask a girl out on a date, what do you typically do? Dinner and a movie? Maybe coffee? Well, I like to separate myself by using what I'm passionate about, sport. So I've asked girls out to go Muay Thai boxing, to go on squash dates, indoor rock climbing. I've even gone sailing with the girl. And they've had so much fun that I would often get that second, third, fourth date. You see, when you're sitting across the table from a girl on say, a dinner date, there's a lot of pressure on you two. You're thinking about what to say to her. She's thinking about how to answer your questions. And I like to take the focus off of that and onto something fun. And I found that this is a much more natural way, a much more low-pressure way with which to get to know somebody. There was actually this one girl who I was trying to ask out, and she just would not go out with me. And I only found out later what the reason was, because she confided in a mutual friend. She expressed her frustration to this friend in that, what kind of a guy asks girls out on these kinds of dates? And the answer to that question, of course, this guy. I was actually glad that she never agreed to go out with me, because if you're not into these types of activities that I am, maybe it's better that we part ways. I don't waste time with people that should not be in my life. I actually use sport as a filter, both for my romantic partners and for the friends in my life. Now, sport has also allowed me to connect to family. My dad taught both me and my brother to play table tennis growing up. And whenever they're visiting me in Hong Kong, as they are right now, say hi, Dad. Whenever they're visiting me in Hong Kong, this actually makes up a huge part of our family time. It's one of the favorite things that I like to do with my family. And it actually makes sense because Yao, this is the character for our last name, is just one stroke away from the ping in ping pong. When my nephew comes to visit Hong Kong on his school holidays from Canada, guess how we connect? And it's not Thomas the choo-choo train. My 92-year-old grandmother, her dementia is to the point where even if she's sitting beside a window with the sun shining outside, she's not able to tell you if it's day or night. But as you can see in this video, sport has actually allowed us to connect as well. Not bad for a 92-year-old, right? So sport has also allowed me to connect to the world. I'm not a huge fan of traveling, but if you give me an excuse to travel, like a fun sport, I'm there. So snowboarding, scuba diving, Muay Thai boxing, these have all given me excuses to travel to places like Japan, Thailand, and the Philippines, and given me an excuse to connect with the people there. It actually gives me an excuse to travel to connect with the people that I travel with as well. So in effect, by being abroad, I've actually made more friends right here in Hong Kong. And that picture of me snowboarding is actually what the TEDx organizers saw, because I was in Japan when they called me to do this talk. So when I did my interview, that's actually what I was wearing. Now, do you guys know where the Republic of Palau is? It's this small island nation, just 700 kilometers east of the Philippines. And the only reason I know this is because one of my we organized a beach volleyball tournament a couple of months ago where we were blessed to have some teams visit from this country. Now, sport can also help us reconnect to society should we ever find ourselves disconnected. One of my beach volleyball club members is named Carol, and Carol is extremely shy. Shy to the point where simple interactions like getting a haircut or just wanting to get off a minibus cause her huge amounts of anxiety. So she was also bullied in school. And on top of this, Carol has a schizophrenic mother who tried to end her own life on multiple occasions. Now, Carol's an adult now, but here's a picture of her with a younger brother. And this younger brother also suffers from schizophrenia and OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. And in 2012, this brother actually jumped off of a building and ended his own life. Now, understandably, this was a very difficult time in Carol's life. Her parents weren't able to take care of themselves afterwards, forcing Carol to step in. And she actually had another younger brother who was not willing to step in at that time. This younger brother even once attacked Carol because she simply wouldn't show him how to use the washing machine. It was incidents like these that caused Carol to hide from her friends, to disappear from Facebook, and to obviously sever connections with this brother. But what did Carol turn to in this extremely depressing time? It was sport. And she found that sport was much more therapeutic than any of the counseling sessions she went to as a teen. So she turned to meditation, yoga, Muay Thai boxing, which were all great for Carol because she didn't really need to talk to anyone. She was really shy. But with beach volleyball, it required teamwork and social skills, a couple of things that Carol was not willing to engage in, especially since she had severed ties with family and certain friends. Now, when Carol first came to our club, she was constantly apologizing for her lack of volleyball skills and her poor English, which actually weren't that bad, but Carol had confidence issues. I actually saw something really magical happen on our beach volleyball court because now it wasn't only me, but my other players that embraced, encouraged Carol. They laughed together on the sidelines. And it was one of my proudest moments knowing that something I created out of beach volleyball was able to connect these unlikely friends. At the end of the season, Carol actually told me that playing beach volleyball with us had made her less shy, had increased her confidence in speaking English, and also just overall made her less angry with the world. Now, back in university, sport had helped me to put my phone down, to make friends, and even sing like a crazy person. And it helped. Nowadays, I can say that I can use sport and go anywhere and connect with anyone. And Carol has used sport to reconnect with society. So I asked you guys, who will sport connect you to? Thank you.